No matter how hard they try, even the most successful Hollywood movies usually slip up somewhere. It doesn't take a genius to spot a simple continuity error or something where it shouldn't be, but coming up are a few movie mistakes that only the biggest brain boxes could notice. Wonder Woman. The first installment in DC's Wonder Woman franchise, starring Gal Gadot as the ass-kicking Amazonian warrior, was a roaring success in 2017. Despite its warm reception, the movie isn't quite soundproof when it comes to the blaze of gunfire the story takes place in, which is of course World War I. Even superheroes are partial to a bit of on-screen chemistry, and we get that pretty early on in Wonder Woman when Diana Prince awkwardly comes face to face with a naked Steve Trevor, who later becomes her trusty sidekick. As Steve emerges from a natural underground pool worthy of an upmarket spa and finally decides to put his kid back on, there's one tiny error which slipped by most cinema audiences. An audible zipper can be heard as he pulls his pants up. Where's the mistake, you ask? Well, zippers on trousers weren't actually invented until the mid-1920s. And even if they were a thing when Wonder Woman takes place, Steve Trevor still wouldn't have one. Zippers were first used on American military uniforms, and Steve is a spy serving in the British intelligence, so his pants would definitely still have buttons. Mary, Queen of Scots. Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie did a pretty stellar job of bringing the historical icons Elizabeth I and Mary Stuart to life in 2018. But the reality of these feuding cousins differs slightly from what we saw on the big screen. The movie builds great tension, which culminates in the scene where the pair finally meet and size each other up as strong, independent women ruling in a man's world. It might be a particularly poignant moment in the movie, but there's one small problem. Mary and Elizabeth never actually met in person. Although they exchanged letters and had ample opportunity, they never came face to face before Elizabeth had her cousin cruelly executed in 1586. In fact, some historians argue that if they had just talked it out IRL, Elizabeth might have felt different about sanctioning Mary's tragic ending. Mary is also depicted as having a thick Scottish accent because she's the Queen of Scots, right? Well, in reality, Mary lived in France until she turned 18, so she almost definitely would have had a French accent, rather than suddenly adopting the mother tongue immediately after touching down on Scottish soil. Still, hats off to Ronan and Robbie for doing justice to two of the trickiest women in history. Spider-Man: Homecoming. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is hardly grounded in reality, but that doesn't mean things like the Staten Island ferry being dramatically cut in half shouldn't still obey the basic laws of physics. In this scene from Spider-Man: Homecoming, the ship is sliced in two by the Chitauri's advanced weaponry and comes to a halt as the lower half starts flooding with water. Thankfully, good old Spidey is there to hold the pieces together with his webs until Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, shows up and welds the whole thing back together just in time. Physics buffs have speculated about what would unfold if this happened in real life, and the sad truth is that the movie's quick solution to the Staten Island severing doesn't quite hold water. Or rather, it holds too much. Firstly, the momentum of the ship means it probably wouldn't stop right away, and at the very least one half would still have a functioning engine and would probably speed ahead. What's more, Tony's efforts would only succeed in sealing the water inside the boat. Even if it was put back together in time, the ferry would probably sink before our heroes could save any passengers. So at least we know who not to call in such an event. The Fate of the Furious. Speaking of throwing physics out the window, let's turn our attention to one of the most far-fetched movie franchises out there, The Fast and the Furious. In the 8th installment in the series, 2017's dramatically titled The Fate of the Furious, it seems like pretty much anything goes. In one memorable scene, the team is chased by Cypher, played by Charlize Theron, in a nuclear submarine which tears through the ice, tailing the vehicles at breakneck speed. It looks pretty epic, but only the most clued up viewers could know that this particular sub, called the Akula-class submarine, has a reported top speed of 25 to 35 knots, which is only about 32 to 40 miles per hour. What's worse, those speeds only account for underwater travel, and its reported max surface speed is a mere 11 to 13 miles per hour, which is definitely not fast enough to catch up with a speeding Lamborghini. If that wasn't ridiculous enough, Cypher then targets Dom by launching a heat-seeking missile which he somehow outruns. Even Vin Diesel couldn't achieve this feat because the slowest missiles still travel at speeds of Mach 2.5, which is the equivalent of over 1900 miles per hour. For some perspective, that's faster than a speeding bullet. Nevertheless, Dom escapes unharmed, all while somehow controlling the car on dangerous icy terrain. Remarkable stuff. Bohemian Rhapsody. If you're going to make a biopic about someone's life, it's probably best you get all your facts straight first. 2018's smash hit Bohemian Rhapsody, which focused on the legacy of Freddie Mercury, is by no means a total disaster, but any true Queen fan will tell you it isn't perfect either. Take the song Fat Bottomed Girls for example. In the movie, the band performs the track on their first American tour in 1974, but in reality, this song wasn't released until 4 years later in October 1978. Well after Bohemian Rhapsody was recorded. You might also remember seeing the band dramatically break up just before their iconic Live Aid performance in 1985. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Although they took a short break in 1983 to focus on other projects, the band never officially split up. In fact, they even recorded their 11th album, The Works, during this period. While addressing rumors about a possible breakup during a gig at Wembley, Mercury had this to say about it.
The rumors are that we're going to split up. What do you think? They're talking from here.
Seems like the movie might have been talking from there too, Freddie. Django Unchained. Quentin Tarantino is one of the most respected filmmakers in the business, but that doesn't mean he's immune to making the odd mistake here and there. His revisionist Western blockbuster Django Unchained, which tells the story of a freed slave come vigilante, stays pretty true to its Texas 1858 setting, except for one interesting fashion choice. At certain points in the movie, Jamie Foxx, starring as the titular character Django, can be seen sporting a pair of trendy sunglasses. This certainly seems a smart choice in the sweltering midsummer heat, but unfortunately there's no way Django would have owned such a useful item. Although early sunglasses had existed in China from the 12th century, they didn't make their way to America until Sam Foster started mass producing them in 1929, a whopping 71 years after the movie is set. Unless Django somehow time traveled into the future, he'd have been shielding his eyes just like everybody else. Skyfall. The James Bond franchise is full of impossibilities, but you'd expect the recent installments to be a little more rigorous with their fact-checking, especially when actual science is involved. Cyanide has been used in spy movies for decades, and countless spies have allegedly stored deadly cyanide pills in false teeth which they can bite down on in hostage situations. These suicide pills do have some scientific grounding because cyanide can kill in 2 to 5 minutes. But there's one exception which bends the rules. Skyfall. In the 2012 Bond movie, the evil mastermind Javier Bardem explains that he bit down on a hydrogen cyanide capsule, which remarkably didn't kill him, but melted his jaw and disfigured his face. Science expert Deborah Bloom explains that this makes basically no sense. Firstly, hydrogen cyanide is best known as a lethal gas rather than a corrosive liquid. When it is found in liquid form, this type of cyanide is usually referred to as prussic acid or hydrocyanic acid, which actually falls below citric acid on the acidity scale. In other words, it would be less acidic than lemon juice, which isn't usually known for its face-melting properties. I hate to think what would happen if Bardem drank a glass of Coke. Independence Day. Independence Day is one of the most iconic alien invasion movies, but anyone with a basic understanding of computer programming will realize that its dramatic finale is pretty much all around nonsense. Here's a little refresher. Jeff Goldblum's character David Levinson has a light bulb moment and decides to program a nifty little nondescript virus which he then uploads to the alien computer system, bringing the mothership down in a matter of hours. Simple, right? Actually, no. According to tech-fluent critics, this master plan to save the human race isn't just stupid, it's nigh on impossible. This is because computer viruses are written for specific operating systems. Windows viruses are written using Windows, viruses affecting Macs are written using Macs, and so on. Assuming the tech used by the alien ships already surpassed human knowledge by some 200 years or more, it seems pretty unlikely that Levinson could just whip up a virus capable of corrupting a totally unknown operating system, especially considering he did it all using an Apple PowerBook, which was hardly the height of computer processing. Braveheart. It might be one of the most highly celebrated pieces of historical filmmaking, but some would argue that the Oscar-winning flick Braveheart actually got more wrong than right. You'll remember watching a blue-faced Mel Gibson sporting a kilt, but this iconic costuming actually veers randomly into the past and future rather than staying true to the actual Anglo-Scottish wars. Although the blue face paint the Klansmen wear into battle is certainly fearsome to look at, historians have pointed out that this tradition had been abandoned hundreds of years earlier. The use of woad face paint has been identified as a habit of the pre-Roman Celts and Picts, not medieval Scots. What's more, although the story takes place in the late 13th century, kilts weren't even invented until the 16th century, making this unusual fashion choice about 300 years off. Klansmen like William Wallace would have actually worn a garment known as a line croich during battle. This yellow tunic would have been dyed with saffron if you were rich enough, or urine if you were a peasant, so maybe Gibson dodged a bullet after all. Gravity. Alfonso Cuarón's 2013 space epic Gravity did a great job at most things, except maybe having a sound understanding of the concept in its actual title. The most tense scene from the movie, the one where Sandra Bullock and George Clooney's characters are tentatively tethered to their craft just one wrong move away from drifting into the endless void of space, is fundamentally flawed because of this error. That's right, spoiler alert, Clooney didn't have to die. Astronomer and science communicator Phil Plait has explained that gravity works differently in space than it does on Earth, so all that was needed to save Clooney was a gentle tug. When Bullock is holding on to Clooney, they're both stationary and have the same angular momentum. This means that gravity wasn't pulling him away at all. There were no forces at work and no weight to bear, yet he inexplicably insists she has to let him go anyway. Just an ounce of force applied for a few seconds would have been enough for Clooney to drift past Bullock and grab the rope. Instead, he unclips himself and is thrown back into space by some invisible force. Sayonara to the worst astronaut ever. Titanic. James Cameron is a true perfectionist when it comes to directing. So what could possibly be wrong with his era-defining tragic romance Titanic? The movie is an adaptation of the real events of the sinking of the Titanic in 1912 with some added artistic license, but the mistake identified by outspoken astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson is far more nitpicky than you could ever imagine. According to Cameron, deGrasse Tyson sent numerous snarky emails to the director claiming that he failed to depict a historically accurate night sky in one of the movie's most iconic scenes. That's right, when Rose is laying there, shivering to death and gazing up at the stars above her, she's not actually seeing the correct constellation. Can you imagine? According to deGrasse Tyson, the left portion of the sky field used by Cameron was also just a mirror image of the right. After a couple of face-to-face encounters, Cameron challenged the astrophysicist to submit an accurate rendering showing the sky as it appeared on the night of April 15, 1912. At around 4:20 a.m. deGrasse Tyson happily obliged, and the original night sky was replaced just in time for the 3D re-release of the movie in 2012. I'm glad that's settled. Were you smart enough to notice any of these movie mistakes? And what other big screen screw-ups should I know about? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.